Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar, Boosting Productivity and Profitability Through Employee Retention. This event is brought to you by Food Engineering and is sponsored by Hickson Architecture and Engineering. I am your moderator, Jeremy Gerard, Digital and Online Editor of Food Engineering Magazine. Thank you for joining us. Today's presenters are Brian Southerly, Project Architect and Leader of the Corporate Workplace Business Unit at Hickson, and Jim Schreier, a Project Manager at Hickson. In his role as Senior Project Architect, Brian is responsible for programming, design, and related tasks for Hickson's corporate workplace and R&D projects. Brian also serves as the leader for the firm's Corporate Workplace Strategic Business Unit, helping establish direction for the unit. Brian holds a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Cincinnati. As the project manager at Hickson, Jim has managed construction projects ranging from $2 to $50 million in value and been involved in efforts such as a 142,000 square foot LEED Gold certified flavor manufacturing plant, a 290 square foot LEED certified dairy plant, and a 25,000 square foot ice cream facility. Jim holds a Bachelor of Science in Architectural Engineering from the Milwaukee School of Engineering, as well as a degree in economics from Miami University of Ohio.
Hickson has addressed a number of design and operational issues to help you meet the changing requirements of the food manufacturing industry. Very few issues, however, rise to the level of importance of finding and retaining skilled workers to meet your operational needs. The problem is commonly referred to as the war on talent. You are in a competitive labor market with other manufacturers for the scarce resource of talented individuals. A recent study by the Manufacturing Institute and Deloitte estimated this deficit at almost 2 million workers nationwide. This problem is traced to a number of demographic, social, and educational issues outside your control, but is typically noted as the problem of baby boomers retiring, an expanded economy, a skills mismatch in training and education, and unfortunately a negative view of manufacturing as a career. A new generation of workers, millennials, will bring a very valuable and social skill set to the workforce, enabling higher levels of collaboration than ever before. Their innate skills, coupled with on-the-job training, will make them highly sought after in this new marketplace. Once you've been fortunate enough to find these workers, it can be every bit as difficult to retain them, certainly as their productivity levels increase and their market value increases as well. The internet will easily enable them to make comparative studies among prospective employers, and where these new workers' needs are not attended to, engagement will be low between themselves and the company, and the likelihood of retaining them will decrease. When a skilled worker leaves, taking the institutional knowledge they've gained and retained with them, overall productivity decreases and your financial performance will suffer. A recent study of research papers by American Progress studied the exit costs of employees leaving, the cost of hiring and onboarding a new employee, the expense of a base level of training, and the accompanying short-term productivity loss experienced by a lack of a worker, and found that the direct financial cost was somewhere between 16 and 20% of the first year's salary. We believe that's certainly valid for a relatively unskilled worker, but may understate the true long-term cost of their leaving. We believe there's a larger and yet more undefined cost stemming from key skilled workers leaving. As fewer but more sophisticated workers are relied upon to maintain production levels, the greater the impact they'll have upon the quality, availability, and performance of your production line work. This performance metric is commonly referred to as OEE, or Overall Equipment Effectiveness. And as you're fully aware of, in manufacturing, OEE is a key predictor of product profitability. In our opinion, investing in the things that actively engage employees and engender loyalty to your company is a critical investment in the effort to retain the long-term knowledge base that ensures future profitability. And our examples and our learning outcomes that we're going to talk about today reflect just a few ideas that you may incorporate into a more comprehensive strategic plan to retain your employees. It begins by understanding how making cultural changes can increase the engagement of your workers to improve retention. We also want to present examples of how improving local environmental conditions can improve productivity. We also want to understand how you can improve upon the employee welfare areas to decrease fatigue and improve overall performance and safety. And finally, how coupling new technology with traditional training spaces into your building can help you meet the employees' lifetime learning needs. To begin the topic of cultural change, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Brian.
Thanks, Jim. People, our employees, are important to us and to our company's collective success. After 6 years of scientific and medical research review, the Well Building Standard went public for industry use and application in October of 2014. The Well Building Standard focuses on both the people who occupy the building and the building they occupy by identifying over 100 metrics within the 7 key feature groups that you see listed here. Well is a very challenging standard, and it's not written with the food plant environment in mind. That said, there are practical applications in Well that can be implemented and may make sense for your consideration. We wanted to introduce Well to you for 2 reasons. First, we consider Well a roadmap. It's a great place to start to look for some direction and maybe even find answers. And second, because of the focus on people, and with that, a focus on retaining them and retaining your employees. We're probably all familiar with Stephen Covey's quote, "Seek first to understand, then be understood." Some call this a compassionate curiosity for others. The truth is, empathy and culture are soulmates. This is immensely obvious in a food plant culture that values its employees, and this is often most evident in the way leaders and associates communicate. Bottom line, it's important to put yourself in the employee's shoes, or boots in this case. We'd like to jump to our first poll question for today, and we're asking a favor of you, that you think first of your favorite employee. And I know we're not supposed to have a favorite employee, but when that phrase is uttered, I'm positive someone's come to mind. So answer in light of being your favorite employee. From your employee's point of view, we ask you to answer the following. Why would you leave your company? Is it boredom for lack of challenge? Is it inadequate compensation? Possibly job stress and unfair treatment? Lack of opportunities for professional development? Or poor work-life balance? While we're waiting on the poll answers, we'll jump to some information regarding corporate culture and performance. There's been a great deal written about this. In fact, in 1992, Harvard professors James Haskett and John Cotter published a book titled Corporate Culture and Performance, with specific content out to how a company's culture affected its long-term economic performance. The conclusions in this book basically state that a strong corporate culture are most often associated with strong financial results. And those corporate cultures typically value highly valued employees, along with customers and owners. In 2008, the same James Haskett and several others wrote a Harvard Business Review article titled, "Putting the Service Profit Chain to Work." This introduced the idea of the service profit chain audit, in short, a way to measure these ideas. The author team states that internal quality starts the chain, and is made up of workplace design, job design, employee selection and development, employee rewards and recognition, and tools for providing service to customers. If the chain begins with internal quality, that breeds employee satisfaction. Employee satisfaction drives loyalty. Employee loyalty drives employee productivity, and employee productivity value. Value drives customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction drives customer loyalty, which in turn drives profitability and growth. The bottom line is retaining your employees is a strategic investment. In response to our poll questions, it looks like 34% of you agree that lack of opportunities for professional development is a reason that your favorite employee might leave. And not too far behind you, two answers: inadequate compensation and job stress or unfair treatment at 23%. Thank you very much for your answers. We'd like to talk a bit about measurement, as already mentioned in the Harvard Business Review articles. Obviously, we measure run averages by the hour against theoretical maximums. We measure downtimes and identify the reasons why there was a downtime. We record OEE by SKU, both by the hour and by the shift. All of this is very important because we simply can't change something that we don't measure. It's also true, however, that we cannot celebrate what we don't measure. Ideally, our goal needs to be that we should measure employee engagement as the same critical items as OEE and safety. In 2012, Gallup made headlines by discussing that almost 70% of employees were disengaged. They reported that the U.S. had 29% engagement. Employees not engaged or actively disengaged were 54% and 18% respectively. And global percentages were worse. Engaged employees at 13%. Gallup's conclusions were the following: engagement makes a difference to the bottom line, and that managers and leaders play a critical role in that, and that different types of workers need different engagement strategies. This graphic, depicted in a follow-up article, speaks to that engaged employees will create a better product and service. It states that 22% higher profitability, 65% lower turnover, 41% fewer quality incidents, and 21% higher productivity, all as a result of employee engagement. Two comments that aren't listed in this graphic that may be of interest to you: it also allowed for 48% fewer safety incidents and 10% higher customer metrics. The bottom line is it's reasonable to conclude from this information that if you have a high turnover rate when compared to your historical values or other industry values, this might be a sign of low employee engagement. Before we get to the body of our presentation today, Jim would like to introduce a number of assumptions.
Thank you, Brian. And so, as we start to talk about our solutions, it's also important to start to talk about our assumptions. And that first, we assume that you are providing a locally competitive salary and benefits package, and that you're not losing the war for talent over dollars alone. We also assume that you're meeting all personnel safety requirements and providing the appropriate PPE. Without meeting these minimum requirements, any solution we offer may be a secondary concern to your workforce. It is also assumed that your talent and skills needs will change in the future, given the growing applications of robotics in manufacturing, where repetitive work is being automated. Recruiting and retaining future workers will shift more towards line operators and advanced technicians rather than low-skilled labor. Where workers are displaced by automation, this does offer a unique opportunity to retain and retrain loyal employees for a higher and better use if the proper training environment exists. A recent experience by a Hickson client illustrates the growing problem of skilled labor market shortage as a function of automation. In 2000, Hickson designed a greenfield food plant for a client that at the time was a state-of-the-art facility. Less than 10 years later, the same client, producing the same product, built, or rather renovated, an existing facility with a more advanced robotics and line automation in hopes of achieving a higher productivity level. Their operational capacity goals were achieved. And so if we simplify their particular example, you could state that each employee was producing a base level of 1 unit for production per employee with the original plant. When the new plant came online, the same number of, half the number of employees now produced twice the much product, producing a 4-time multiplier in productivity. Their operational challenge, however, now is to find and retain the skilled workers for their highly automated factory. Ironically, automation produced a worker shortage for the client. We also assume that the food plant of the future will continue to be harsh by office standards when competing for skilled laborers. Food manufacturers are beholden to food safety requirements such as FSMA, requiring washdown rated spaces. Manufacturers also must consider productivity or OEE expectations and drive down operational expense goals to ensure profitability. These primary goals often result in general human comfort being a secondary consideration. Without large increases in capital for renovation or increases in operational expense budgets, making these environments less physically and mentally fatiguing will remain difficult. In our research for this webinar, we were happily disproven about a false assumption we had made about millennials, the future of your workforce. By 2026, almost 75% of all workers will be millennials. As with every named generation, we're told how different they are as if they act in a monolithic way. The IBM Institute for Business Value conducted a comprehensive survey of millennials to understand their career aspirations and found that their needs really aren't all that different from prior generations. It's not unreasonable to believe that a worker of any generation wants a great work environment that they can succeed in. What may be different is the understanding by millennials that they're truly knowledge workers and that their skill set is portable within the marketplace. In general, what may separate millennials from prior generation is their willingness to seek other employment where their workplace does not meet their needs. And so one of our prior poll questions, the primary answer was lack of opportunities for professional development, and that would be an excellent example. Building a sustainable culture for millennials that millennials want offers a unique and competitive advantage for those employers willing to engage their workers in a meaningful way. And so we come to the second of our poll questions, and again ask you about your favorite employee. When you consider the harsh environments that some manufacturers have for their workspaces, what changes would have the greatest physical impact on your favorite employee? Would it be more comfortable PPE, boots, gloves, local temperature and airspeed control, perhaps better ergonomics of work functions, such as providing a chair, noise reduction within the workspace, shorter travel distances, perhaps to the employee welfare area, or perhaps even better lighting. We want to talk about worker engagement and how we can begin to address it by addressing the physical nature of working in a food plant. The heavy workload, harsh environment, perhaps poor communications as a function of a noisy environment among workers, or the inability to rest or relax, often result in fatigue of your associates, poor decision making, lower productivity, sometimes safety concerns, but ultimately, as a net effect, higher turnover. We believe there's tremendous opportunities to refresh and replenish your workers during the day while simultaneously reducing the stressors that drain their body. And so as we come back to our poll question, we had a clear indicator that better ergonomics of work function would have a better physical impact on your favorite employee. One aspect of your employee's environment that we want to talk about is addressing their thermal comfort. So the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning developed what's known as ASHRAE Standard 55 to quantify thermal comfort as a function of metabolic rate, which is essentially how much you're moving around, the clothing insulation level, what you're wearing, The air temperature, the mean air temperature of the space, in addition to the air temperature of the air coming off the conditioning units, the actual airspeed or velocity, and the humidity level. In a food plant, you are likely limited in your ability to control many of these items without affecting food safety, operational expense, or employee safety. We do know that ASHRAE has although ASHRAE has identified an ideal temperature and humidity range, that workers can be made more comfortable by affecting, to a better extent, some of these items. What we'd like to talk about is perhaps the greatest opportunity for you to make changes to your employee comfort for stationary work by simply altering the airspeed at their workstation. And so we consider a refrigerated space, perhaps one of the most challenging environments to make workers comfortable. How do you improve thermal comfort without adding heat load or reducing the effectiveness of the refrigeration systems? How do you also mitigate the chilling effect of sub-zero air blowing across your employees? As an example, the unicooler shown can produce an air velocity at the face of somewhere between 550 to 650 feet per minute. And although air velocity decreases rapidly across distance, even 20 feet per minute of airflow at sub-zero temperatures can have an immediately chilling effect on your workers. So your challenge is to first identify stationary work. Where do your workers congregate? Then you want to measure with an anemometer the actual airspeed at that space. And finally, although some may not like it, to poll your workers. How comfortable are they? Is it always uncomfortable, or are there periods in which it's made more uncomfortable? The solutions may reside in changing the airflow within the space. And so you could begin with taking that unicooler and first turning it up. And your goal here is to make use of what's known as the Coanda effect. And that is, as air is pushed across the ceiling, it has a tendency to cling to the ceiling, then fall gently within the space. And so in the picture at the bottom, Hickson recently installed what's known as a drop supply box in order to achieve just that. The project was a meat grinding room that previously had 6 unicoolers, all with horizontal discharge. In the words of the workers, it was a bit of a blast chiller. The air bounced off the walls and onto the occupants, providing a very chilling effect. Workers were uncomfortable in the space and obviously less productive. So as part of an overall renovation of the area, Hickson installed a drop supply box, as you see in red, that discharged air on all 4 sides, allowing the air to fall gently across the space and returning it back up through the green area. This had a number of effects for not just the workers, but also the plant. It reduced the airflow across the worker's body. It took a maintenance item of the unicooler out of the space and up to the rooftop unit. It reduced the overall noise level within the space. And because the unicoolers were ammonia, it took ammonia out of the space as well. Hickson's studies into productivity improvements indicate that simple thermal control of the airflow such as this can improve worker productivity by 3% or more, which I would consider to be a very conservative value. Another challenging environment is a hot environment. And our recommendations here is to, again, consider the use of airflow in a tactical sense. While increasing air speeds using stationary fans, possibly to 100 feet per minute or more, may seem extreme and noisy, the convective cooling effect across the body is effective in maintaining employee comfort. So in a manufacturing facility recently that Hickson was involved in, we were able to help the client achieve LEED Gold and achieve the thermal comfort points by using tactical airflow within a challenging space. The space itself was a mixed blend deck that had a lot of high ambient heat and humidity. And during the summer months of this southeastern U.S. facility, it got pretty uncomfortable. And so by including a number of stationary air fans, we were able to create a chill zone of sorts for the workers to operate in. And so while the airflow velocity was increased to almost 200 feet per minute and was producing a little bit of noise, It wasn't anywhere near the local ambient noise and was certainly drowned out by the ear protection of the employees. But a very uncomfortable space was made much more comfortable without the unnecessary capital expense of conditioning the entire area. Another opportunity for improving the overall environment for employees is to address problem areas that are dark. The first consideration is introducing daylight through solitubes that can be an effective way of bringing natural daylight to a work area while also increasing the vitamin D levels among workers. This also has the net effect of improving the circadian rhythm, that is the natural ebb and flow that people are used to in terms of seeing daylight for workers that are generally indoors all day. Where natural daylight is not a practical solution, the simple placement of vitamin D fixtures where workers may congregate during rest periods can provide a suitable alternative. Finally, consider improving the task level lighting. High bay fixtures may be effective in broad distribution of light, but may be largely ineffective at the worker level. The discrete placement of task lighting will improve productivity, decrease eye strain, and reduce workplace accidents. For our own research into high-performance buildings, we have found that effective lighting strategies can improve productivity levels anywhere from 1 to 20%. And so as you start to think about a comprehensive employee comfort, consider this own picture. In this photo, the simple addition of anti-fatigue mats, ergonomically adjustable chairs, coupled with better lighting and airspeed controls, makes this once difficult working space not necessarily comfortable, but appreciably better. Employees understand the limitation of their work environments and naturally appreciate any opportunity to improve their working conditions. Where workers have intermittent periods of rest available, but insufficient time to reach the employee welfare area for a true break, consider an enclosed space not unlike a guard shack for the inside of your building. A local manufacturer recently installed this enclosure as shown in the photo. This is an enclosure within a hot space and was lightly conditioned. And this enclosure provided needed relief not just from temperature, but also from noise. It shortened the distance to a break area. It provided local amenities and access to personal items. And so if you consider what one of these spaces may look like in a real-world application, you can include a number of amenities that otherwise wouldn't be available on the food manufacturing plant. In essence, you're giving your workers a mini pit stop area to go for just a few minutes during work functions to recharge and relax and refresh during the day to be more productive during their workday. But for extended rest periods, only a true employee welfare area may suffice. For that, I turn the presentation back over to Brian.
Thanks, Jim. All of us have probably noticed descriptors and/or verbal signals that cultures have shifted within the food plant. We've noticed this with our clients. People once called workers are now called associates, and associates were once called employees. This is true of Hickson. One of our current clients actually calls their associates family members. We've also seen a shift from the phrase employee welfare areas to employee amenities. We'll get into more of this in a minute, but we'd like to move to our third poll question of the day. Again, from your favorite employee's point of view, what amenities would have the greatest impact on de-stressing your favorite employee? Is it better food choices? Perhaps more comfortable furniture in the break room? Access to natural lighting or quiet spaces? While waiting on those answers, we'd like to ask this. Where can and are you able to take the non-plant spaces to the next level? One way we're seeing our clients do this is to use break rooms and other spaces for more than one purpose. In fact, almost all spaces are become multi-use or multi-purpose and are being used a variety of times during the day or during the week or even during the month. In this particular case, our client wanted a break lunchroom with flexibility in table locations and its seating. That was largely because the space was also going to be used for the all-company gathering place. And to do that, there was a portable raised platform that you might be able to see there in the middle of the picture, so that when a speaker was speaking, they were elevated and a little easier to see. Also, technology had to be added to support these functions. The client wanted no visible vending machines to kind of do away with the mystique of the vending machine bank when you walked in. And yes, that is a fireplace in the distance, the back of which screens the back of the vending machines. The view wasn't great from this room, and that's why you see a unique screening method on the windows, and skylights were added in the break room as well. This room is also one of the public-facing spaces if the local community is inviting into the building. Your answers from the poll question illustrate that about 39% of you believe that quiet spaces would have the greatest impact on de-stressing your employees. And following that, 23 and 25% respectively for comfortable furniture and natural lighting. Thank you for your responses. We're seeing a variety of clients look at improving finish qualities. And by that, we mean that they're finding that if places look nicer, generally those who occupy the space will treat it and believe it to be nicer. Finish levels in this case, like different types of laminates on the counter and on the cabinets in the room, lighting under the cabinets in the room, and also the use of luxury vinyl floor tile in lieu of VCT. Our client looked at maintenance levels for both VCT and luxury vinyl tile and determined a payback of less than 2 years in this recent case. As a society, we've all become, and still becoming, more digitally dependent. In fact, the Global Weekly Index reports that since 2012, we have increased our average time spent on mobile devices by 200%. Most food plant environments don't allow use of cell phones, except perhaps in designated areas like lunchrooms or break rooms. One client recently shared that they were excited to be able to add a Wi-Fi network in their lunch amenity space. Not surprisingly, the cost of doing so came in a little higher than budgeted, and so some corners had to be cut. When over 50 employees were on break at the same time and all kept connected to the new Wi-Fi network, it crashed. In this particular case, it created more of a downside than an upside. The first impression became a real challenge to overcome. The obvious lesson is to make sure that we look at the future and extend facilities like this to that point. Also, we need to consider quiet. The plant environment is regularly considered to be highly physically challenging, and we've discussed some of those reasons already. But we realize there's another side to every job and every person, the mental side. Over the past number of years, a variety of studies have come out regarding the human brain. Here's an interesting fact. The human brain weighs about 2% of the entire body mass, yet it consumes almost 20% of the body's daily caloric intake. The same studies also illustrate that multitasking can increase error rates by as much as 50%. Neuroscientists are finding that as we grow tired, the brain becomes more easily distracted and does so almost automatically. It turns out the distraction appears to be an energy-saving mechanism. So how do or can we overcome this challenge? There's evidence that the quiet spaces that have been talked about, even if occupied for only a few minutes, can allow us to reset with the ability to get back to work and more quickly do our work more effectively. And if you would really like to push the envelope, perhaps you could put in a massage chair that has a 5-minute coin-operated control. Every facility, food comes up as a topic. Most of our clients use outside food specialists and consultants for this, which we often work with to both specify equipment and make sure that everything is designed properly and laid out properly. It's critical to have a well-thought-out plan in place, perhaps one that starts in phases, and providing the things that are going to get you the maximum impact for the dollar spent. Obviously, there need to be enough employees who will participate to make this viable, and participation levels typically drive costs. With multiple ship facilities, coffee and some type of food availability, often without the use of vending machines, is regularly discussed by our clients. Some are considering going to even more elaborate lunchroom facilities that reflect a much more corporate appearance, nicer finishes, larger menu varieties, and most things that are unexpected in most food plants. One client that we have didn't go quite so far. They have salad, fruits, and vegetables that are washed and prepared on site, and the client works with local sit-down, fast casual restaurants to provide hot food. One day the food's Italian, the next chicken, when you get the picture. The client insisted on very specific functionality, including several warming ovens and a staging area where the food can be kept warm until the lunch hour begins. Food is transferred to countertops constructed of antimicrobial materials. Employees plate their own food and eat in a very nicely appointed lunchroom. The client was also enabled to negotiate pricing with local restaurants by limiting the menu. In preparation for this webinar, just this past weekend, the Cincinnati Enquirer article was published and provided additional information for us about how corporations are beginning to look more creatively at solving the need for daycare preschool facilities for companies. For the mid-20 and 30-year-old employee's family, this is a very attractive amenity. And there's talk now of corporations trying to find solutions for even second and third shift needs for childcare. A great deal of study, including how the facility will be managed and by whom, and there are a number of providers, and the associated cost with doing so is really only the beginning. Some clients have worked out discounted rates with local childcare providers, and location is of extreme importance. A location on site is valuable and a positive amenity for new moms and dads. Having children nearby makes drop-off, pickup, and the occasional trip to the doctor's office much easier. Another value to the on-site location, it becomes a billboard to the community that the company is serious about and cares about its employees and their families. Exercise and fitness has become a very pressing issue for most companies, largely as a result of continuing healthcare costs. Ball fields, outdoor exercise areas, or paths for employees who would love to take a walk or ride a bike are great, but they come with many challenges. Plant properties don't often have enough land or available capital, not only to provide, but to maintain these amenities. And obviously, these need to be used before or after work. Even when space is available, the separation of employees, families, and truck traffic can be challenging. Some clients have begun to negotiate with local fitness facilities to allow employees to work out and exercise at reduced rates. And some have even provided and or negotiated the availability of trainers to assist with specific programs. Speaking of trainings, we'll go back inside the building now as Jim talks more about that.
Thank you, Brian. And so that brings us to a final poll question. What issues do you need to address in your training spaces to be more effective in training your favorite employee? Is the location within the plant, size of the space, technology available, and that the space is available when actually needed? As you're pondering your answer, I will tell you that here at Hickson and among several of our clients, we see that companies are providing both training and education that address social and financial needs. To address this new learning environment, we feel that you need great training spaces and tools. And so when you're thinking about your answer, consider not just what you're doing today to meet particular requirements for exercise or for solving particular challenges, but how can you think more holistically about your employees and their educational needs over a lifetime? And so when we think about training, training is key. Metaphorically, it's the cog that provides the link between your digital and human knowledge base and your capital equipment. And without this link, OEE and profitability will suffer. So providing the right training and education is not just key to profitability, but also a way to engage your employees in a meaningful way that demonstrates their value to the company and will help improve employment satisfaction. And so as we come back to our poll question, we can see that technology available was the primary answer. Thank you again for your responses. Training requirements. You have a number of training requirements that are driven by specific work functions that will change over time, such as FSMA or food safety requirements, perhaps advanced robotic repair. You know that you'll need to do more microbial testing for food plants, and that this may want to be an in-house function requiring additional training, and that more QC functions will need to be conducted on site. You should consider the variety of spaces needed to accomplish this educational paradigm and the technical materials to support the training for your new associates. And so when you start thinking about training spaces, you have to realize that training in the future will really occur throughout the plant, not just in the open office areas, but also out into the food plant itself. As a highly social group, millennials will appreciate varied levels of personal training such as peer-to-peer coaching in small huddle spaces. Teams of individuals can be trained effectively in small spaces where appropriate technologies such as mobile smartboards, large monitors, and perhaps robust wireless access are available. For more solitary training, Carol spaces can be effective for associates viewing on-demand training and educational videos, either internally generated through a subscription service or even perhaps free content available via the internet. Finally, large conference areas will continue to be needed. To maximize usage of these spaces, they are often designed as multi-purpose, allowing functions such as large private meetings, training rooms, break rooms to coexist through the effective use of movable partitions, desks, and chairs. In the maintenance area, traditional spaces should be coupled with more advanced technology to make digital content from O&M manuals, plans, or the internet readily available to your workers. So you want to make current knowledge more accessible, mobile, and meaningful. Also in the maintenance room, you consider a digital hub that workers can gather around, again, look at the digital content. And the picture on the right depicts that same presentation being recorded via iPhone with a small tripod. So that you can use digital content or digital technology to record these sessions, not just to have for later knowledge reuse. Finally, on the line, with more workers needing to be more trained on HMIs, consider the use of mobile technology that can push out HMI content onto mobile devices, allowing more workers to be trained simultaneously on the line. And again, recording those sessions for later reuse. And finally, embrace future technology. So millennials are obviously highly adept at technological requirements of not just devices but software. And so you can consider the use of next generation technologies such as VR goggles for training purposes. Recently, NFL quarterbacks have been using this technology to improve the number of snaps without getting knocked over on a daily basis. All of this goes to wow the millennials and improve your employee retention. Finally, in conclusion, when we consider this chart, we understand that intuitively there's a relationship between employee satisfaction and lifetime loyalty. And as you can see, a satisfied rating alone may be insufficient to move you out of the dreaded zone of employee indifference and prevent you from achieving your retention goals. Employing these three ideas, along with other workplace improvement efforts as part of a comprehensive cultural shift towards engagement, will help you win the war for talent. And so, in conclusion,
we've started by helping you begin to understand how cultural changes can increase engagement of your workers and improve retention.
We've also talked specifically about how controlling local environmental conditions can improve retention and productivity.
And we've talked about how to improve upon the employee amenity space to decrease not only fatigue, but improve employee performance.
And we've also talked about how having a Nice faces with available technology can help satisfy the lifetime learning requirements of skilled employees.
Thanks, Brian and Jim, for a great presentation. And now, we'll have our presenters address some questions that have been submitted throughout the program. The first question asks, what is your opinion on allowing employees to take a power nap during work hours?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Frankly, it comes up quite often, and maybe not necessarily in the plant, but the long story short is I think we have to look carefully at the idea of breaks and how they will occur in the future. Power nap in a room like we've talked about here could provide just the space, not too far from the working floor, where somebody could grab a few-minute nap and get back to work. Again, it goes to the point of just resting for a few minutes is a good idea. Obviously, every company is going to have a different point of view, and perhaps even every plant a different point of view about that. But I think it's something worth conversing about within our different facilities.
We'll move on to the next question. This next participant asks, I want my employee welfare spaces to look nice, but also be rugged enough to stand the constant traffic. What types of floor and wall finishes would you suggest?
This is Brian. The reality is that different materials are coming out all of the time, and all manufacturers do offer testing of the materials for a variety of situations. So our responsibility is to look at those and to make sure that they're going to hold up to the plant environment. And frankly, getting the right information is sometimes a challenge. So we've seen a variety of things we mentioned, and I think they need to be placed in the right spaces and not tried to be used in incorrect applications. That would be the biggest warning and or fear. There are a variety of wall finishes that are becoming more popular because they're easy to maintain and they stand up to the abuse of constant traffic and possibly people bumping into them. There's also a variety of flooring materials like we talked about here with luxury vinyl tile and a variety of others. Again, it requires good testing information and a good assessment of whether they'll hold up in the environment.
Thank you, Brian, for that answer. You both talk about how important employee engagement is in your presentation. What are some things that you can do to improve employee engagement?
This is Brian again. We at Hickson have been testing employee engagement with our associates for a number of years, and that's primarily done through a survey that we hold and do, I believe it's every year actually. We started by adding the Gallup Q12 questions, which you can search online and find, and those basically are geared at specifically this idea of engagement. And we use those to test against our own folks here. Secondly, I would suggest that the best way to make your employees engaged is actually talk to them. I think with technology today, it's real easy to survey people electronically and get the information back that you'd like to have. But the bottom line is there's nothing to replace a good old-fashioned conversation and get to the real problems. And more of that would go a long way toward employee engagement.
And I think it's also important to be transparent with your employees in the results of any polling that you may take. So for instance, here at our office, all of the results are made public to the general workforce, and the answers are discussed openly at town meetings. And so not all answers may in fact result in an actual change, but it's important for the employees to understand that their voices are being heard and that where it's suitable, changes are being made. But certainly without a good poll or a good survey, oftentimes line operators' voices in terms or complaints in terms of their working conditions may go unheard. But when effectively coupled with other workers, it brings the issue much better to the attention of managers in a position to make a change.
Thank you both for that answer. And while we're on the topic, this next question asks a similar question. that you may be able to expound on, what is the best way to measure employee engagement?
This is Brian again. I think the best way to measure it in this case is really to go with something that's a tried and true system. I would look at the Q12 Gallup questions and see how many of them can apply to your particular situation. But that's a good place to start. Obviously, they may need to look at those questions, and some of them be eliminated or be tweaked to go against what you're actually asking.
And I think it's important, especially when you consider OEE and tracking your productivity levels, is to also track your metrics of engagement over time as well. And again, as with many manufacturers, display that in an open board for everyone to see. So not just the good news, but also the bad news and how management is addressing those issues. Again, when workers feel like their managers are hearing their complaints and that they're being addressed or at least acknowledged, that tends to engender a lot higher levels of engagement and subsequent loyalty. We hope that answers your question.
Terrific. Thank you both again. We'll move on to the next question. Discuss training as a way to improve employee retention a little more. What other types of training have you seen?
Certainly, that's a great question. What we've seen is not just training for specific work functions, which is obviously your first order requirement, making sure that your employees understand how to operate a line or a particular piece of equipment or repair that piece of equipment. But as we stated in our presentation, training is becoming much more, I hate to use the word, paternalistic in nature. Employers that can provide not just technical training, but also provide some social, financial skills training, perhaps addressing specific needs of workers in terms of their base level education, providing the means to complete a GED online, complete a certifications either in small group or as part of an on-demand webinar. Obviously, we are a multicultural society with a large number of immigrants that may be working in the food plants, and English as a second language is probably one of the more paramount concerns, not just for your employees, but also for your employers in terms of maintaining proper communications. And so the use of on-demand webinars, such as, not to endorse, but Rosetta Stone, that can be accessed by employees through corporate resources in off hours, is an excellent way of providing a low-cost education and training for your employees that, again, helps engage your employees, it helps improve them as individuals, and hopefully over the long term, increase their overall loyalty to the company. But again, I think it begins as starting to expand your idea of training beyond just technical functions and think about individuals and their social and financial burdens that they have on a daily basis, and how can you educate them better. Hope that answers your question.
If I could add briefly to that, the idea of reverse mentoring typically doesn't show up as a training discussion, but it's a great way for people that have a variety of skills and a variety of experiences to train a younger person, and believe it or not, the young person can also train those of us who've got a few years on us. So reverse mentoring is a good idea in corporations, not only to build morale, but also a great way to train people in like kind.
Thank you both again. It looks like we have time for one last question. Besides the obvious ideas like nice finishes, well-lit spaces, and internet access, what other amenities have you seen that make the employee welfare space a real hit with associates?
This is Brian again. The client that we mentioned that calls their employees family members, the amenity spaces there are a little off the charts, I would say. Pool tables, foosball tables, basketball courts, and a variety of other activity spaces. Basically, they've insisted that their facility be built so that people want to be there with their families, even when they're not working. So it becomes more of a almost expanded family room environment during those off hours. So it's an interesting concept to us, something that we've seen parts and pieces of, but that's a fairly bold stroke on their part.
And coming back to the issue of your changing workforce, as you think about millennials, and again, perhaps in a monolithic way, they are a bit more social than prior generations. They value interaction with their peers, an opportunity to play, having spaces that are conducive to personal gatherings, maybe quiet spaces that they can get together, even play online video games. But consider how important socialization between your workers is, and do you have the right spaces and amenities to provide for that? A foosball table seems like a silly example, but I would bet that if you walked into most employee welfare areas that had a foosball table, it was being used.
Well, this concludes today's webinar. So please join me again in thanking Brian Southerly and Jim Schreier for their presentations, as well as our sponsor, Hickson Architecture and Engineering.